This podcast is supported by MIDI Health. Are you in midlife, feeling dismissed, unheard, or just plain tired of the old healthcare system? You're not alone. In fact, even today, 75% of women seeking care for menopause and perimenopause issues are left entirely untreated. But it's time for a change. It's time for MIDI. MIDI's not just a healthcare provider. It's a women's telehealth clinic founded and supported by world-class leaders in women's health. Their clinicians provide one-on-one, face-to-face consultations where they truly listen to your unique needs. They offer a full range of holistic, data-driven solutions that isn't one-size-fits-all care. This is care uniquely tailored for you. At MIDI, you will find that their mission is clear: to help all women thrive in midlife, giving them access to the healthcare they deserve. Because they believe midlife isn't the middle at all. It is the beginning of your second act. Ready to feel your best and write your second act script? Visit joinmidi.com today to book your personalized, insurance-covered virtual visit. That's joinmidi.com. MIDI, the care women deserve.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies. Try it at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
Welcome back to another episode of Investies. I'm your host, Linda Garcia, Texas State Representative and author of the book Wealth Warrior. This week on the podcast, we have a very special guest that I will introduce you to in just a bit. Before we get into that, let's go ahead and review what took place last week in the market. We had important economic data that was released last week. We definitely had a lot of volatility. Despite the volatility, the market is working to recover some of the losses that it's had in the last several weeks. So we did close positive for the week last week on all three indexes. Last week, we received the GDP numbers for Q4. They didn't look so great. It came in at 1.4% for the quarter. Compared to the previous quarter in Q3, that was 4.4%. So you can see the drastic drop there. Analysts were expecting a drop, but they were expecting 2.8% for the quarter. Now, analysts are attributing this to the government shutdown and, of course, the continued inflation. The biggest economic news last week was the Supreme Court striking down Trump's tariffs. The ruling is being considered a massive loss for Trump, given that he has made this a part of his agenda and the central part of his agenda. He's also asserted global power with these tariffs, and so this can be perceived as weak and not having the ability to, I guess, dictate. Many tariffs were invoked using the IEEPA, which is International Emergency Economic Powers Act, and the court ruled that the law does not grant the presidency authority to impose tariffs. This ruling was something that was anticipated, and so companies that were impacted by tariffs were preparing lawsuits in order to reclaim the tariffs that had already been paid. We're looking at about $133 billion in tariffs, and these companies are looking to receive their money back. In other words, they want a refund. Trump had previously shared that he was potentially going to distribute $2,000 tariff dividend checks. I want us to be aware that not only do I see this as a typical Trump tactic where he likes to overpromise and then never deliver as a way to string Americans along for his agenda. We know that tariffs did add to inflation. And let's just say that in good faith, he does inject those $2,000 back into the economy. That does create additional inflation. And while I understand that it would definitely provide temporary relief, especially right now, I want you to understand that that temporary relief is not free. Those $2,000 will not be free. It is another injection into the economy that can further flare inflation, which means that that stimmy check that we got, the one that he was so adamant on signing, remember that? We are still paying the price for it. Those low interest rates that we had, we are still paying the price for it. Somewhere in the tune of 25% increase in goods and services over the last 5 years. The market did have a positive reaction to the Supreme Court striking down Trump's tariffs. It understands, especially from these earnings reports, the impact that tariffs have had on companies and, of course, on consumers as well. However, Trump did announce that no matter what, we are going to have tariffs. He is now enacting a 10% global tariff on everyone. As of recording this episode, we are still not clear how these tariffs are going to be distributed, if this is going to be on top of the ones that did sustain, because not all of the tariffs were taken down by the Supreme Court, just the ones that were enacted by EPA, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. So we still don't fully, as of the recording of this episode, understand very clearly how this is going to be executed. Also, in his press conference, he did say that he is going to fight to keep the $133 billion that have already been paid. So he has removed the idea that we would receive any type of dividend. Not a surprise there. He wants to hold on to that money. And so now we have Wall Street analysts pondering the impact of taking that money out of the economy and into the U.S. government. Switching gears here, while I do firmly believe in Investies' mission of disseminating economic information and stock market information to make it much more accessible to folks like us, to take us away from solely being consumers as we drive up the stock market, but to also take ownership. I am proud of the work that we do here, but unlike Pam Bondi, I don't think that we should center what is taking place with the stock market to mask the horrific things that are happening in the country. And so, as you know, from time to time, we do talk about politics here. I do have a special guest. I'd like to give a warm welcome to Senator Nathan Johnson, who is currently running for Attorney General here in Texas. He brings policy depth and legal expertise, along with the reputation for taking on the most difficult problems, asking the hard questions, and working to fix what's wrong, no matter who or what stands in the way. Through his 4 sessions in office, there runs a thread of defending constitutional principles, advocating for responsive government, and insisting on fairness and consistency in the law. Senator Nathan Johnson is not only a colleague of mine, but he has also been a mentor. I just want to give a very special shout out to Lonnie. Their office is always helping our office as I navigate this space as a freshman. I also had the privilege to carry 3 of his bills on the House side, which is something that a lot of freshmen don't get exposure to. Please welcome Senator Nathan Johnson. What did you want to be when you were a kid?
I suppose it depends on the age. When I was 5, I wanted to be a marine biologist, mainly because I liked drawing fish. I think that's kind of in common with, I liked things that I associated with professions that I didn't know anything about. Even in high school for a while, I wanted to be a physicist because I thought the history of physics was so cool. Later on, when I was a physics major, I realized I wasn't all that great at it. So changed. So from marine biologist to physicist, I think for about a week when I was an adolescent, I wanted to be an Olympic diver.
Okay. I could see that. I could see that about you, actually. Very determined, big goals.
Lack of coordination.
Yeah,
That was the impediment, that I just wasn't that graceful.
sure. So you are a physicist major, and then you decide you're going to go to law school. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, I wasn't very alert to the humanities in general, and I thought that it would be much more responsible to be an engineer or a science person. And I was good at math, and I got A's in my physics major, but I feel like physics was almost like baseball. If you're in the 98th percentile, you're out. If you're 99th, you're okay. And I just felt like I wasn't sufficiently gifted to really make a career in physics and be satisfied with being detached from the rest of the world, detached necessarily from the social questions that I found as a college student were really occupying my mind. And I took some class in law school with a professor, or in undergraduate with a professor that I liked. I thought, oh, I love thinking about this stuff. And that is like a really good excuse for being unemployed, going to law school. I wasn't really that mature in my thinking. I just knew I was suddenly really in love with the idea of thinking about social questions and social problems and trying to solve them. And law school seemed like the right thing to do.
This is a Monday.com ad. The same Monday.com helping people worldwide getting work done faster and better. The same Monday.com designed for every team and every industry. The same Monday.com with built-in AI, scaling your work from day one. The same Monday.com that your team will actually love using. The same Monday.com with an easy and intuitive setup. Go to Monday.com and try it for free. Yes, the same Monday.com.
You mentioned a sense of responsibility when it came to making a career choice. Are you saying that you sort of felt responsible for what you were going to contribute to the world? Like that's what you were basing your career decisions on?
I think that's a really kind, but I'd like to believe accurate characterization. Actually, since I was an eighth grader, I was kind of bent on figuring out some way that I could use my abilities in a way that's most useful to people. And being an Olympic diver wasn't it. And so I was searching for a way. How does my head work? How is it different from how other people's heads work? Because I don't want to try to compete with them if that's a place where their brain works better than mine or their personality fits better than mine. So yes, I think I was looking for a way to occupy my time and my talents in a way that's useful.
Yeah. And then you finish law school and Dragon Ball Z happens. Can you walk me down how you go from, wanting to be a physicist to then law school and then Dragon Ball Z in Texas? How does that happen?
Yeah, it's not a road I recommend to people. A direct path is easier. And I didn't go from law school to music. I went from law school to being a lawyer. And I was a lawyer for several years. I really felt out of place as a lawyer. The practice was nowhere near as fun as law school to me as a young man. And I had been studying music my whole life on an amateur basis. And I was pretty good, but ultimately I knew I wasn't really good. And as I was getting better at playing the piano during law school and at sort of writing my own music while I was a young lawyer, I met an internationally acclaimed serious classical composer and showed him some of my work. And he said, "This is crap." And I knew I had found somebody who could really help me. And he said, "This is crap, but I'm surprised you're able to do something like this with no training. You want to study with me?" So I studied privately with him for about 5 years while I continued to practice law. And eventually I practiced law part-time. And then I decided to quit my job. I was married at the time. And, I kind of had warned my wife that I may go off in this direction. And she was brave and generous and said, "Look, pursue it." So for a while, I tried to make it in music, and I set a deadline. I know, sorry, Lynn, this is kind of a long answer, but it's just—
No, I want to hear this.
Life gives us very strange journeys. And we were starting a family, and so I set a deadline. If I haven't made it by such and such a date, I give up, and I'm going to go back to being a lawyer or something to make money again. And that date came and I hadn't made it. So I gave up. I quit. And I had already pivoted from classical music to trying to write for film and television because, gosh, I had to make a living somehow from Dallas, Texas. And I didn't want to, move my family to LA. And so I quit. And at the moment I went back to law, I got my break in the music world. So I talked to this company that owned the Dragon Ball Z property, and they said, why don't you wait just a couple days before you start practicing law again and come talk to us? And a few days later, I went to work for them and eventually scored 67 episodes of Dragon Ball Z and wrote the scores for 5 movies, produced them, developed a whole new electro-orchestral style for the show, and had a good run of it for a while.
So honestly, that's incredible, especially to get to do it from Dallas, Texas, and not being close to Los Angeles, where it's the mecca of production. My question is, why didn't you stick with it? What made you go back to law school, or to being a lawyer, excuse me?
And Linda, this also not almost, to some extent, this relates to my political philosophy. I knew that succeeding as a composer depended on talent, hard work, and luck. And I'm not sure I had any of the 3 in enough capacity, but eventually I broke in and I was making a living writing music from Dallas, Texas. And I flew out to LA and brought some of my samples, and I met with the producer, and she said, "Hey, you're as good as anybody I got on my desk, but I will never work with you because you live in Dallas." So I was landlocked. But I broke in anyway, and I got very busy, and eventually I had my own small music company, and I was looking to hire composers and build studios. And I had literally hundreds of shows waiting for me to finish scoring them in the pipeline. And about 3 weeks after I had that peak load and was starting to look for space to build a studio, I had 0 work. Everything disappeared in about 3 weeks, and it was all because of bad luck. At that moment, and we're talking like 2007, 2008, 2009, I don't remember exactly, but young viewers of Dragon Ball Z and other anime properties figured out how to buy their DVDs, because that's how these companies made their money. They put them on TV, but then they package them and sell the DVDs. People started ripping DVDs, uploading them, and downloading them for free. That gutted the profits of the entire industry, and everybody cut their music budgets to 0 or went bankrupt. Mm-hmm. So in 3 weeks, I went from having 300 shows to having nothing to do, which was kind of a shock. I was 39 years old. I had given up a lucrative, respectable career wearing a suit and being a lawyer. I'd clawed my way into the music business. I'd made it to some level. It wasn't, like a lavish success, but I was growing. And then it was nothing. So that was a bleak moment.
Yeah, of course. I don't know if we've ever talked about this, but I used to work in television and radio here locally in Dallas.
We haven't.
Yeah, so we have that in common. And,
It makes so much sense.
I gave up during 2008 financial crisis. I just couldn't do it anymore.
Why?
Well, I was an account executive at the time, so I had this unique path where I was a marketing major, and I was an account executive, and I was on-air talent. So my whole pitch was, I'll do your production on a commercial. I'll be the talent. I won't charge you for the talent, but you have to sign a 3-month deal with me. And it was kind of like an easier pitch, and I would get people to sign on. And then the 2008 financial crisis happened and everyone was cutting back. I mean, people were looking for ways to consume content for free, like you just mentioned. I mean, everyone was cutting corners everywhere. And so that diverted me for a while from television and radio. So I relate. I get it.
And so we both understand how financial realities beyond your control can affect your career path, can affect your family life, can affect so many things. And we have to brace ourselves for those and we have to be able to recover. I was also involved with some startup film funds that were going to produce packages of films, and I was going to score 1 out of every 3 film they produced. We were meeting with investors and everybody was just going. And then the 2008 financial crisis, all that capital disappeared. So all the films that I had lined up disappeared. So there we were in 2008, both of us, looking for some other way to make our way through the world.
That's right. So how do you go from practicing law, although I know it's not a stretch because a lot of our colleagues are lawyers, but how do you go from practicing law to deciding you're going to run for public office?
Well, I'd already had a couple of jumps. When my music prospects disappeared, I did spend about 4, 5, 6 months trying to figure out what am I going to do? And I figured out that the only thing I knew how to do was practice law. And I was 39 and people weren't that interested in my potential otherwise. So, but even then, I started taking a much stronger interest in community activities and political matters. So I was probably thinking, just because my mind had space to wander, certainly didn't want to go into politics at that point. My kids were young and I needed to make a living and reestablish myself professionally. But my thinking really got started then. I went back to law. I had a lucky reentry, just as I'd had bad luck in music. I re-entered with some bankruptcy expertise at a time when there was a lot of bankruptcy happening on a commercial and consumer level, and had some friends in the business, went to work with one of them. And we had a nice, good run with a 2-person law firm and was able to practice law, make a living, have a good life. It was good. But I was watching politics. And what really set the radar off was the 2014 Republican primary and the 2016 presidential election. I was in a 30-year Republican district with a very popular moderate Republican state senator and a very popular, then moderate state representative. And there was no real window anywhere. But in the 2014 primary, that popular incumbent moderate Republican senator got beat in the primary. And I just thought something's off here. I got to think maybe there's a window here. And then in the Trump-Clinton election, in the district, I looked up the numbers. I found that Hillary Clinton beat Donald Trump in Senate District 16. And people couldn't believe it, but it's just the raw numbers. And you poll her popularity in the district. It was terrible. But they voted for her anyway because they thought Trump was off the edge. So that told me there's an opening here, and everyone thought I was nuts. And I watched for about another year and determined, I think I can beat this guy. And my career then was reestablished. I had a 2-person law firm. I was successful. I was making money. I had clients. I could put it on pause for a year and run for office and come back to it. We were stable as a family. We were stable financially. My career was reestablished. My children were older. And I thought that there was a very destructive force at work in politics. And if I had the ability to reverse that, I felt like I had the obligation to do it. And I kind of feel like we all ought to think about our lives that way. If you're able to make something better, you have an obligation to make it better.
Yeah. Yes, I agree.
That's why I ran.
Yeah.
Hey, want a cookie? Oh, I know you just ate, so you're craving something a little sweet. Besides, one cookie isn't gonna kill you. How about half? Just a bite? Bite it. Bite it. Bite it.
Food noise isn't fair, but Mochi Health is. Your affordable GLP-1 source that puts you on a path to successful weight loss by quieting food noise.
Bite it.
Shh. Learn more at joinmochi.com. Mochi members have access to licensed physicians and nutritionists. Results may vary.
You're reminding me of so many things. I have never mentioned this publicly, but in 2016, I started paying attention to politics. I think we all did, right? And I started a podcast with a young lady that was involved in politics called Women Who Misbehave. My producers have no idea about this, but we would talk about politics and spirituality. I knew a lot about spirituality. My co-host knew a lot about politics, and she wanted to learn about spirituality because I think she saw the crisis we were headed towards. And I wanted to learn more about politics because I wanted to see how I could plug in and help change things. So
2016, that is?
Yeah. It was a terrible time. Not as terrible as it is now, but it was terrible. I want you to, let's switch gears here. You are senator. You flipped a Republican seat. You identified the opportunity. you decide to run for attorney general at a time where we really need change. Can you tell us what the attorney general does? Can you just educate us on that?
Can I back up just a little bit first?
Please.
I think I do sometimes underestimate what any of us can pull off, but I also have my arrogant side, or I like to say, actually, I don't like to say arrogance because I don't really believe that. I think arrogance is confidence without humility, and I do have confidence that I can be effective in my job as a senator, or I wouldn't have run.
Mm-hmm.
And I value you in office because I know you're really good, and I hope you know that, because that makes you work hard. Because if you're not there, someone not as good as you is going to be there. And so that's what I think ought to drive us. If you really do think you're good at this, go for it. And if you don't, you probably shouldn't. And so Attorney General, I have confidence that I can serve the public very well in that role, with the humility to know that I'll have to work with great people and work very hard to fulfill that. So what is it that we're talking about, this confidence that I have confidence I could do well? It's the Attorney General's office. It's a mystery. It's the chief legal officer. Let's talk about what it's not. It's not the top cop. It is not the prosecutor in most instances. It doesn't generally have criminal prosecutorial authority. The Attorney General is the chief legal officer of the state. It's an independent executive. It's almost a split of the executive branch of government. It's kind of a co-equal power to the governor, but it's only in the legal arena. So what does that mean? What is it, this office that has more than $1 billion budget? It has 4,000 employees and 800 of them are lawyers.
Wait, what? Can you repeat that?
A $1.34 billion biennial budget, 4,000 employees, 800 of whom are lawyers. That's the Attorney General's office. It's a big place with a lot of power, and it's all run by the Attorney General. The Attorney General does some very basic things that affect people's lives, like collecting child support, working with people who are struggling to make payments, going after people who failed to make payments, dealing with families that rely on them. And I mean, it's a big deal. It requires a lot of social services, and it requires legal action. That's a tremendous proportion of what the Attorney General's office does. It also protects the environment by issuing something called civil investigative demands. It issues them to corporations. Let me zoom out a little bit. Almost anything you can think of that involves businesses or government, the Attorney General is involved. The Constitution gives the Attorney General two basic responsibilities. You represent the state of Texas, and in a minute we'll talk about what the heck that means. Secondly, you police corporations. You police the private sector behavior and make sure that corporations aren't doing something that's outside of their power, that breaks civil laws. They aren't wielding too much influence over government. Really, that's the kind of thing that the conservative framers of the Texas Constitution had in mind. And when I say conservative, I don't mean in the modern sense of Republican, Democrat. Those words have been so butchered. What I mean is they didn't trust power in the hands of anybody. They didn't trust a governor with too much power, or a legislature, or a corporation, or a business sector. They didn't trust anybody. So they created this independent office with constitutional power to be a check and a balance against abuse. And it is there to protect, ultimately, people in the marketplace from abuse of corporate power and from a corrupt government, in the case of government. And we have the power to work with those top cops, local district attorneys and police departments, to provide resources. We also, as Attorney General, advise the agencies on what's legal, what's not legal. We work with cities. If cities need to raise $1 billion to build all your streets and fix all your streets and take out your trash, they issue bonds. The Attorney General approves of those bonds or doesn't. The Attorney General works well with cities or antagonistically with cities, which can affect the borrowing costs of cities, which can affect the tax rates of residents of cities. So go any direction, the Attorney General is going to be there.
So, for example, right now in the state of Texas, we are watching state agencies change the rules on, for example, the DMV is now requiring for us to prove citizenship, housing, and correct me if I'm wrong. I know
And I may not know. I mean, this is encyclopedic level stuff, but let's explore it.
Okay, so, and one of my colleagues, the state representative, I think it was Brian Harrison, is the one that proposed this rule for the DMV. And then we have a list of other changes that are taking place with the Texas Agency for Housing. Off the top of my head, I haven't memorized the correct names for those agencies.
Texas Department of Housing, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I've worked with them. I've actually tried to help us get more affordable housing.
So they're now going to be asking for to find out whether or not someone
proof
has
of citizenship.
Proof of citizenship.
That's a great question to find out whether that's something that they have authority to do, and it's exactly the kind of thing the Attorney General's office ought to be issuing an opinion on. So actually, now I kind of want to know the answer myself. It doesn't sound like appropriate action by a state agency unless directed by statute, and even then, it's probably a violation of constitutional rights, because the Supreme Court of the United States has ruled that constitutional rights extend to non-citizens and citizens alike. So the Attorney General is involved in all that kind of stuff, particularly when we have right-wing, regressive, base-baiting, can I swear on this program?
You can.
Base-baiting bullshit policies that are they often, we throw the word racist around so much, but sometimes they just are. Some of this stuff is just racist, and it's certainly mean, and it's certainly biased. And I'll give you an example that I have looked at. The comptroller declared the historically underutilized business program unconstitutional and said, I'm just terminating every aspect of that other than giving money to veterans. Who the hell is the comptroller to start talking about what's constitutional or what isn't? As the Attorney General, I would have shut that down. I would have started with a public statement. I would have followed up with an Attorney General opinion. If there needs to be legal action thereafter, there would be private citizens who sue the comptroller for shutting it down. And then we get into this really funny question, Linda. The Constitution says that the Attorney General is the attorney for the state of Texas. Well, an officer of the state of Texas just got sued for allegedly violating or exceeding their authority. Doesn't the Attorney General have to defend the comptroller? Well, the Constitution doesn't say that I'm the comptroller's lawyer. It doesn't say I'm the governor's lawyer or Brian Harrison's lawyer. It says I'm a lawyer for the state of Texas, and arguably that means the interests of the state of Texas, which is people in Texas. And if there's an officer, what if the governor loses his mind and thinks that everything that's unconstitutional is constitutional, and everybody else in the state thinks he's lost his mind? Am I supposed to go with the governor or No, I will uphold the rule of law. That's in the interest of the state of Texas. And the comptroller has no authority to terminate a legislatively created program on his own theory. Actually, it wasn't his own theory. He was probably told what to do. It was someone else's theory of what's constitutional. And that's why this office is so important, as well as the examples you gave. If there are unconstitutional or just mean-spirited statutes that are being put forward by people like Brian Harrison in the name of bullshit base baiting, the Attorney General has to be there to block those kinds of actions. Also, last thing, I know I'm monologuing here, but the Attorney General issues these opinions. They don't have the force of law, but they have tremendous weight. And the private sector is scared to death of these kinds of right-wing pronouncements. They're afraid they're going to get sued by Ken Paxton, the Attorney General right now. I would put out Attorney General opinions that say there's no basis for this. Any business who does this is violating constitutional rights, or even if they're not even violating rights, unless they're statutorily compelled to take that action, I will issue an opinion that says you're safe. You don't have to do what Brian Harrison says you have to do.
Oh my gosh. So it's not just the housing, it's also the Texas agency that controls licensing. So basically cosmetologists now, nail technicians.
Every agency.
Yeah, basically almost a whole slew of agencies. And I was so confused when this was presented to us just yesterday. So it's like information that hasn't hit the media.
And I feel really good for not having already studied up on it if it just came out yesterday.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So no worries, no pressure. But
In the vortex of a campaign.
I know. And I just was really confused because I thought that if something like that so significant is going to change, it has to come through to us, to the House or the Senate. Would that, or am I looking at this completely wrong?
I don't know, Linda. Agencies are part of the executive branch of government, and they are given broad authority by the legislature to implement the laws.
Okay.
And they can put certain requirements in place.
Okay.
We can override, if we don't like the requirements as a legislature, we can override them.
Got it.
Or if we don't want to give them the discretion what to do, we will prescribe exactly what they have to do and say, and you can't change any of these requirements. I'd have to look in these individual cases. I don't like the idea that cosmetology licenses are now going to become instrumentalities of federal immigration law. I think that quite possibly violates federal supremacy laws, constitutional principles of who controls immigration law and who does not. This is not a freaking census being conducted by every element of the government. I'm highly suspect that this is legal, but this is the first I've heard of it. And like I said, the Attorney General has 800 lawyers. I would look at this really carefully and really skeptically. Among other reasons, when I'm advising the agencies, it's certainly on what the law is. You're also trying to make government work better. And when people, well, we can pick on Brian Harrison, but he's certainly not the only one. When there's a movement to start having our agencies perform functions that aren't central to what they're supposed to be doing, like the Cosmetology Licensing Board is not supposed to have anything to do with policing immigration status.
Mm-hmm.
I want them to do their job. I don't want to layer on other elements that they're supposed to do, other data they're supposed to track, of the reports they're supposed to file. And then what's next? They're supposed to follow up and give you phone numbers of each applicant, and we suspect they're this, and let's cross-reference it with voter rolls. Then we've got some bloated, big government, scary state, which is pretty much what a lot of these guys envision. These supposed limited government people are actually for big, expansive, intrusive government. And I think the Attorney General has a very important role to play in making sure that our agencies do what they're supposed to do, not become basically outsourced immigration authorities, particularly to state government that doesn't have any goddamn immigration authority.
Yes. Thank you so much for that thorough explanation. I carried a bill last session where I wanted to lower the interest rate for incarcerated parents that owe child support. They can't pay it because they're incarcerated, but that owe child support down to, well, my bill was for 3% because I was trying to inch my way through, which is currently at 6% interest rate. What tends to happen is that when these parents come out of jail, it's really hard for them to get jobs, and then anything that they do make, their wages get garnished and they have to pay this crazy amount of interest. And so I want to know if you would support my bill when I file it next session as Attorney General.
I won't have too much of a role of it as Attorney General in terms of I don't get a vote, but the Attorney General should be able to be extremely helpful in providing information. And occasionally we actually get the legislature to act on a rational basis of data analysis. So let's take a look at the data and see the repayment incidences where people are buried in interest. And I think you're going to see just exactly what you're saying, that people just give up.
Mm-hmm.
And they just become scofflaws because they can't come out from, forget it, I just can't do it. What's interesting is that bill, I think ultimately didn't get a vote, but I think it came through a committee of mine. And I remember raising the question, hey, do we have evidence in other states of people of states lowering the interest rate and having a better return on collections? And we found that, in fact, that is the case, that we did see people pay back more frequently and at higher rates when they weren't charged as much interest. It's not a direct comparison because it was a state where it was this absurdly high interest rate and they cut it in half and it went from 14 to 8 or something. But I think particularly for an incarcerated person who has no way of making money, just to bury them with interest when they come out, and they're going to have a hard time getting a job when they do get out.
Right.
I think your proposal makes a lot of sense, and I think that the Attorney General's office would be a great partner to you in providing information so that you can make that case.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us today. I'm going to ask you one last question. What's one piece of advice you've carried with you throughout your political career? And who influenced you with that advice?
I've distilled this piece of advice from multiple people, but I think it's don't get lost along the way.
Mm.
I think it's very important that we all be open to growth and change, but growth and change is different than abandoning yourself. And particularly in politics, it's very intense. It's very fast. It does involve trying to see things from other people's perspective. I don't know if compromise is, it's certainly a word people don't like. And I'm not even sure it's an apt word, but not letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. So you wind up being satisfied with less than what you want sometimes, but you have to be careful because if you do it too much, you wind up being less than what you were. Linda, I feel like I've fumbled this question.
No, I actually needed to hear that because stepping into this role without me having a desire to be a politician, while yes, I wanted to be more politically engaged and understand how the fuck did Donald Trump become president, I didn't, have a plan to do this. And I'm very expressive and creative in the way I dress or my hair or just things that I do. And, just this week, I'm contemplating if I should lighten my hair a little bit and what that will mean and how I'm perceived.
That's really, really a great example. And people might think that's a shallow example, but because I'm thinking about policy votes and things, and God, we can talk about votes, but you're absolutely right. You could, should Nathan come in with a green mohawk because that's really what he feels like wearing? No, dumbass. I also want to be taken seriously, right? So even if I really feel like having a green mohawk, I'm not going to do it because I also really want to represent people, and I'm not going to be able to do it that way. But, somebody says, Nathan, I don't like that tan suit. It reminds me of Obama. Well, you know what? Go to hell. I like my tan suit. I feel good in my tan suit. You want to lighten your hair? Lighten your hair. Don't lose who you are. Even in how you talk, I generally don't talk the way most politicians talk. I don't like canned speeches and canned remarks. How you doing? I'm great. How are you? Oh, I love that Super Bowl. Shut up, right? Let's talk about something real. So keeping your personality is part of it and taking some risks. I think it's important to take risks. I'm doing it right now, Linda. I'm dealing with it in a primary. There are sometimes you're faced with having to take positions that are going to be unpopular with people who you like and respect and people who like and respect you, and they're not going to understand it. But your job is to represent them. And I think you've got to have the courage to vote your conscience and go back to them and say, here's what's really going on. And that's hard. And what I'll say to that, I'm thinking in particular about both Republican and Democratic colleagues who I've seen collapse under political pressure and go the wrong way against their own instincts. Say, but I've got to preserve my seat. And I respect that to some extent. People don't like to hear that, but there is something to preserving your seat not because you want it, but because you're being effective in there. But if you collapse too often, you can be replaced with a monkey. And invariably, these people who are collapsing under political pressure, violating their own conscience, voting the wrong way, trying to preserve their presence there, end up getting kicked out anyway.
Right.
It wasn't worth it. Stand your ground.
Yes.
Be flexible, listen to other people, be willing to change your mind, be willing to take a dangerous vote, but don't give up who you are politically or personally.
Yes.
Because then we don't need you.
Thank you. I really appreciate you. This was great.
You were so kind throughout it. I hope it's not too boring for your listeners.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Investies. I'm your host, Linda Garcia. Don't forget to head over to your favorite podcast player, rate, review, subscribe to the podcast to get notifications when a new episode comes out. But we always have a new episode on Tuesday. Thank you for listening to Investies. A special thank you to the team Asia Simpson, Eliza Smith, and Jacob Winnick.
Close your eyes. Listen to Monday.com. Feel the sensation of an AI work platform. So flexible and intuitive, it feels like it was built just for you. Now open your eyes, go to Monday.com, start for free, and finally breathe.